Good afternoon. My name is Billy Jo Byerly, and I'm going to give you a presentation on a breach of contract. This class is for International Business and Law and its Environment for National American University Online. Before we start and get too far into it, we're going to talk about what is a breach of contract. A breach of contract is when one small part or the whole contract itself is not met by one of the parties involved. So an example of this would be, a very common example, but not always prosecuted, would be when a buyer writes a contract to receive goods by a certain time and they do not deliver them. So say, an example might be then to say that the goods were supposed to arrive on Monday and they didn't arrive on Tuesday. Okay, does this matter to the company? Was it actually a critical state? Most late shipments are not a fundamental breach, and under the CISG, which we'll talk about in a minute, it gives sellers usually a little extra time, even if they are late. But it can be a breach of contract and be taken very seriously if the whole contract was arrived around a date. So say that you are putting on let's just say a giant marathon, the New York or the Boston Marathon, and you needed your t-shirts by Friday because the race was on Saturday and the t-shirts never showed up until Tuesday, well then that would be a breach of contract, because if in that contract it was well written that the date does matter and it actually caused serious harm to the seller on why they needed it, and it caused for basically money or their business, it was a critical piece to it. So sometimes time can matter, but for most breach of contracts, it's a little bit more than that. It's usually more than just time, because a lot of shipments, logistics is the hardest part of business, right? And the most expensive sometimes. So that doesn't always matter. The buyer. Usually when a buyer has a breach of contract, usually just basically two things is that they did not pay for the goods like they said they would in the contract. Meaning they said they'd either pay it as shipment arrived or within a net 60 of receiving it, or a net 90, or even some contracts are a net 100 or 1 year. But they have to pay for the goods. If they did not meet that part of the contract, that can be a breach of contract. Or they not take responsibility in picking up the delivery of the goods. So say part of the contract was that the t-shirt vendor from the Boston Marathon had to pick up the t-shirts at a certain location by a certain time, and they did not do that. Well, then the seller made good on their part, and it was actually the buyer's part. So that would be a breach of contract on the buyer's part. The seller. Time of delivery. We just got done talking about this for kind of at length. It's really a critical piece of all of this. Logistics is such a hard part of it, and things are time sensitive. Everyone wants their goods as quickly as possible, and they want them right now. The quality of the product. So the seller is saying that we're going to give you 50,000 t-shirts for $4 a t-shirt, and these t-shirts are wicker weather repelling, these amazing shirts for $4. And that's not exactly what they are. Maybe they're a Gildan t-shirt that falls apart after the first wash. So that can be a breach of contract. The amount of products, maybe a partial delivery. So the seller says, I'll sell you 50,000 t-shirts, and this is the day they'll be there, and you only get 25,000 t-shirts, and they're all a size small and medium. You have no extra large products to sell. That can be a huge breach of contract, and it can be a serious issue. Cost. The seller can tell you that the t-shirts are going to be $4 a piece, but that is not what they are. Also damage. So as a seller in the contract, they're promising you or guaranteeing you a certain type, or maybe it's pottery that you bought and there's chips in the pottery overseas or anything like that. That can be a breach of contract on the seller's part. So everyone must meet their parts of the contract, or it's a breach of contract. Now, working internationally, this can be different, as we've discussed in this class for the last 6 weeks, that every international law is different. So it's critical to know and understand the laws of the country that you're working with. That's why what the CISG came up with. It's the United Nations Convention on Contracts for the International Sales of Goods. You can believe it or not, over 70 countries are already part of the CISG, and all 2/3 of international trade. So the CISG is a way to monitor and make sure that trade is happening correctly, and that the breach of goods, that you can go after another company if they did do a breach of contract, not a breach of goods, excuse me. So the CISG is very critical. My recommendation after reading all of these would be to only work with countries that fall in that CISG. There's no guarantee. I mean, if you're buying from a country that we have no legal authority over, there's no guarantee that you're going to get the goods that you are promised or what you think that you're getting. So it's critical to know and be aware of these laws or these international conventions or contracts, and to understand that internationally it's just could be really scary because they don't fall under the same laws as we do. Same with even state laws. I mean, if you go from one state to another, there's different types of laws that are applicable to that. So it's critical, absolutely critical to understand that. And I can't imagine working with a country that wasn't falling underneath this, because there's no guarantee, there's no help. And that's why the United Nations Convention of Contracts for international sales of goods is such a critical piece, because then you have a way to reprimand the person or people or the business that is not holding up their part of the contract. So it's important to know that when working on businesses. So what happens if they don't put on their contract under the CISG? Well, the possible remedies for an international breach of contract: a price reduction. So say you ordered 50,000 t-shirts and it's not for a critical date, and you didn't get them for 3 or 4 months, well, maybe you'll get a price reduction on them. That would be, say you were to be able to say, I lost out of $20,000 worth of sales, maybe you'll be able to meet that up. Specific performance. So the courts may make one of the parties carry out the damages. So say you don't want just the money, you want the actual goods. Well, the court can actually say you must provide what you said you're going to provide, even if it's late. This other company is still needing it. Then also there's always money, monetary. So this includes 2 different types of damages: consequential damages and compensatory damages. This is kind of interesting too. In the event of a breach, compensatory damages basically include the price of the goods that were sold. So if are the goods that you're buying. So if you were, someone say something was damaged and you weren't able to buy it, you'll get that money back. Consequential damages is kind of what the future would hold. Well, if you had everything that you ordered and everything went well, this is the money that you would have made, and that company would need to pay you for that. And that can be a little bit more cumbersome and harder to prove, but absolutely relevant into what a business might need. Here is just a list of my references. I have to say this was probably one of the more interesting international topics because I never really thought about it. How would you go after a company like that when you're working with international seas and air and countries and doing those things? It's very interesting to me. So I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.